I never thought a simple move into a new neighborhood would alter the course of my life. The house next door had been empty for months, its silence blending with my own evenings of solitude. Then one afternoon, a moving truck arrived, and with it came the young man who would turn my quiet nights into something unforgettable. He was polite at first, the kind of neighbor who waved when passing by, and offered a quick smile that carried more warmth than I expected. He looked too young to be living alone, yet there was a maturity in his eyes that suggested stories untold. For weeks, our conversations remained casual. Short exchanges over the fence, a borrowed tool here, a polite thank you there. Nothing more. Nothing to hint at what was coming. Loneliness, however, has a way of turning ordinary connections into lifelines. My nights were long, quiet, and filled with memories of a life I no longer had. The silence of my home grew heavier with each passing day, until one evening I found myself staring at the faint light glowing from his window. The laughter of the TV drifted faintly through the night air, reminding me of the comfort I missed. I didn't plan to walk over. I didn't plan to knock. But something inside me, perhaps the need to feel less alone, drove me to cross the space between us. My hands trembled slightly as I knocked, wondering if I'd regret it, if he'd even answer at all. The door opened, and there he was, surprised, curious, and smiling in a way that felt disarming. He invited me in without hesitation, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to melt the chill I had been carrying for so long. The room was simple, half-unpacked boxes scattered around, a mix of new beginnings and unfinished transitions. We sat together on his couch, talking about nothing at first, weather, the neighborhood, his studies, my work. Yet beneath those casual words, I felt an undercurrent of something more. His eyes lingered on mine longer than necessary, and I found myself drawn to the sound of his laugh, the ease with which he listened. Time slipped away unnoticed. 1 hour became 2, then 3. The night grew deeper, but neither of us moved to end it. My loneliness faded, replaced by an unfamiliar anticipation, as if the quiet between us held secrets waiting to be discovered. At one point, he leaned closer to show me something on his phone. The brush of his shoulder against mine sent a shiver through me, startling in its intensity. I told myself it was nothing, just the closeness of two people sharing a small couch. But the air felt charged, and I couldn't ignore it. When he looked up, our faces were closer than they had ever been before. My breath caught, and I knew in that moment that things were no longer ordinary. That night had shifted something inside me. I pulled away slightly, nervous, unsure of what I was allowing to happen. He didn't push, didn't cross any line, but his silence said more than words could. I realized then that the choice was mine, whether to leave things untouched or to step into the unknown. I stayed. The conversation turned softer, more personal. He told me about the challenges he had faced moving away from home, the uncertainty of starting fresh in a new place. I shared pieces of myself I hadn't spoken aloud in years. My fears, my regrets, the emptiness that haunted me when the nights grew too quiet. Somehow he understood. Hours passed like minutes, and by the time I glanced at the clock, it was well past midnight. I should have left, but neither of us wanted to end the night. There was comfort in his presence, a connection I hadn't felt in so long that I almost didn't recognize it. When I finally stood to leave, he walked me to the door. The night air was cool, carrying with it the soft rustle of leaves. I turned to say goodbye, but the words caught in my throat. His gaze held mine, steady and questioning, as though asking for permission without speaking it aloud. For a moment, the world grew still. I felt the weight of every choice I had ever made pressing down on me, yet there was also a freedom in the possibility of something new. I didn't think, I didn't plan. I simply acted. I leaned closer. It wasn't a kiss, not yet, but the nearness of it, the unspoken promise in the way our breaths mingled was enough to change everything. He didn't move away. He didn't rush it. He just stayed there, with me, in that fragile space between what was and what could be. And in that silence, I realized that my life had already shifted. The next morning, I woke with the memory of that night lingering like a dream I didn't want to let go of. The loneliness that once weighed me down felt lighter, replaced by the warmth of possibility. He was no longer just my neighbor. He was the beginning of a story I hadn't expected but was suddenly eager to explore. In the days that followed, our connection deepened. We found excuses to see each other, sharing coffee, helping with chores, walking through the quiet streets in the evening. Each encounter carried with it a spark, a reminder of that night when I crossed the space between us and knocked on his door. I knew people might not understand. I knew there were questions I couldn't answer, futures I couldn't predict. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the past or worrying about the future. I was living in the moment, and it was enough. Because sometimes all it takes is one night, one choice, one knock on a neighbor's door, for everything to change. And for me, that lonely night became the moment my heart remembered how to feel again. Life after that night didn't return to normal, because something new had been planted, a seed of connection that kept growing every time I saw him. The morning after, I stood by my window with a cup in hand, staring out at his driveway. He stepped out of his front door, stretching in the soft light of dawn. For a moment, I felt like I was watching an entirely different version of my life play out, one where I wasn't trapped by silence, one where my days carried anticipation instead of emptiness. He caught me watching, smiled knowingly, and lifted his hand in a wave. That simple gesture was enough to make my heart race. In the following days, excuses became our silent language. He would come over to borrow a tool he probably didn't need, or I would bake too much and accidentally bring half over to share. We pretended it was casual, that our visits were innocent, but beneath the surface, there was always that tension, the awareness of what had shifted between us on that lonely night. One Saturday evening, he invited me over for dinner. It wasn't anything extravagant, just pasta and wine, but the way he looked across the table at me, his eyes soft and intent, made it feel like a moment carved out of time. I laughed more that night than I had in years. He listened intently, leaning forward with genuine curiosity, and when I caught myself staring at his lips mid-conversation, I realized just how far I had let my guard down. Later, we sat on his porch beneath the fading sunset. The world around us was quiet, only the hum of crickets filling the air. I felt his hand brush against mine on the armrest between us. Neither of us moved away. That small touch sent a ripple of warmth through me, subtle yet powerful, like a secret shared without words. I should have been afraid of the differences between us, of the whispers people might speak if they knew, but I wasn't. For the first time in years, I felt alive. One evening, when a sudden summer storm rolled in, he appeared at my door drenched from the rain. His laughter was boyish, contagious, and before I knew it, I was laughing with him as I handed him a towel. The storm raged outside, but inside, the air was charged with something entirely different. We sat on the floor, talking over the sound of the rain hitting the windows. He told me about his dreams, his ambitions, and how sometimes the world felt too heavy for someone his age. I told him about my regrets, the choices I wished I had made differently. In that storm-lit room, our confessions wove together like threads of the same fabric. At one point, he reached for my hand, and I didn't pull away. His grip was firm, reassuring, and the warmth of it spread through me until I felt tears sting my eyes. Not from sadness, but from the realization that I had been waiting, unknowingly, for someone to remind me what it meant to be truly seen.